He never chased her, not once. She'd expect it, waiting for the extra text, the "are you mad at me?" the anxious follow-up after a quiet evening. It never came. Instead, he just continued, living his life, building his days, present when he was with her, fully present, but never desperate for her attention when he wasn't. And something strange happened. She found herself checking her phone more, wondering what he was doing, replaying conversations, trying to figure out what made him different. Because here's the thing nobody tells you. The men who never beg for love are usually the ones who get it the easiest, not because they're playing games, not because they're cold or emotionally unavailable, because they understand something most people never learn. Begging for love doesn't create love, it repels it. And once you understand why, you'll never look at attraction the same way again. But before we go further, take a second to subscribe, because YouTube rarely shows you the same video twice. And if this helps you understand yourself a little better, we may never cross paths again. Now let's get into it. Psychologists have a term for what happens when someone begs for love. They call it protest behavior. It's the anxious pursuit that kicks in when a person fears they're losing connection. The double text, the over-explaining, the constant reassurance seeking. It feels like love. It feels like devotion. But here's what almost nobody realizes. Protest behavior doesn't signal love to the other person. It signals fear, and fear is not attractive. Fear is exhausting. Think about the last time someone needed you too much. Needed your validation, your constant attention, your reassurance, just to feel okay. It didn't make you want to get closer. It made you want to create distance. That's not cruelty. That's psychology. Humans are wired to move toward confidence and away from neediness. It's ancient. It's below conscious thought. And it explains why the man who never begs seems to have some invisible magnetism the beggar never will. But here's where it gets more interesting. Because this isn't about playing hard to get. That's a surface-level misunderstanding of something much deeper. The man who never begs for love isn't performing detachment. He's not counting the hours before he texts back, calculating some strategy. He's just not anxious. And that's the real difference. Esther Perel has spent decades studying desire, and one of her most repeated observations is this. Desire needs space to breathe. It needs mystery. It withers under too much certainty, too much clinginess, too much need. The man who begs collapses that space. He wants certainty so badly that he floods the connection with it. Texting first, texting again, apologizing for things that don't need apologies, agreeing to anything just to avoid conflict. And slowly, without meaning to, he trains the other person to see him as replaceable. Not because he is, because he acted like he thought he was. Here's where most people make the biggest mistake. They think love means proving how much you want someone. Constant texts, constant reassurance, constant chasing. But psychology discovered something almost backwards. The less anxious a person appears about losing you, the more valuable they seem. It's called scarcity psychology, and it's not manipulation. It's just how the human brain evaluates worth. We don't crave what's always available. We crave what feels earned, chosen, occasionally uncertain. The man who never begs isn't withholding love. He's just not performing panic. And that calm, that steadiness, becomes the most attractive thing in the room. Now think about dating apps for a second. Someone matches. The conversation is good. Then, nothing. A day passes, 2 days. The anxious person spirals, sends a follow-up, then another. Did I say something wrong? The secure person, he just moves on with his life. Not out of coldness, out of self-respect. If it's meant to continue, it will. If not, his identity was never depending on it in the first place. That's the difference. One man's sense of self collapses the moment someone goes quiet. The other man's sense of self was never built on someone else's response time. And that wasn't rejection. It was psychology. John Gottman, after decades of studying couples, found something fascinating. Relationships don't fail because people stop loving each other. They fail because of a breakdown in emotional safety. Someone starts pursuing, the other starts withdrawing, and it becomes a cycle neither person can escape. The man who begs is almost always stuck in the pursuer role. Every unanswered text becomes a threat. Every delay feels like abandonment. But the man who doesn't beg has learned something that changes everything. His worth was never up for negotiation in the first place. Here's what makes this bigger than just one relationship. This isn't really about dating. It's about identity. Somewhere along the way, many people learn to attach their self-worth to whether someone else chooses them. It usually starts early, maybe a parent who was emotionally inconsistent, maybe childhood environments where love felt conditional, something to be earned through performance rather than something freely given. Psychologists call this an anxious attachment style, and it doesn't just show up in romance. It shows up in friendships, in work relationships, in how a person reacts to silence, delay, distance. The man who begs for love was very likely a person, at some point, who learned that love had to be chased. That stillness meant danger. That silence meant something was wrong. The man who doesn't beg He usually did the deeper work first. He built his identity somewhere else. His confidence isn't rented from someone else's attention. It's owned, which means when someone pulls away, it doesn't threaten who he is. That's not emotional distance. That's emotional security. And it's incredibly rare. Brené Brown talks about this, the difference between fitting in and belonging. Fitting in means shape-shifting to be accepted. Belonging means being fully yourself and trusting the right people will stay. The man who never begs has stopped shape-shifting. He's stopped negotiating his value. And paradoxically, that's what makes people want to stay close to him. Think about long-distance relationships, situationships, the modern chaos of mixed signals and half-answered texts. So much of dating today runs on anxiety. Everyone's afraid of seeming too much. Everyone's overanalyzing raid receipts. Everyone's performing nonchalance while secretly spiraling. But the man who's actually secure isn't performing anything. He's just living. And in a culture addicted to chasing, calm becomes rare. Rare becomes valuable. Valuable becomes magnetic. Helen Fisher's research on the brain in love found something remarkable. Uncertainty actually intensifies romantic obsession. Dopamine spikes not when we get constant reward, but when reward is unpredictable. Which means, ironically, the constant reassurance the anxious person offers, the non-stop texting, the over-explaining, can actually dull the spark it's trying to protect. While the calm, secure presence, simply by not over-explaining everything, keeps a small flame of intrigue alive. Not manipulation, just nature. So what does this actually look like in real life? It looks like a man who responds when he has capacity to respond, not out of anxiety, but out of genuine interest. It looks like someone who can sit with silence instead of filling it with panic. It looks like a person who can say, "I'd love to see you again," without needing an immediate answer to feel okay. It looks like self-respect that doesn't collapse under uncertainty. Sue Johnson, the psychologist behind emotionally focused therapy, would say real security in relationships doesn't come from constant proof of love. It comes from an internal sense that you are worthy of it, regardless of the outcome. That's the quiet superpower here. Not indifference, not emotional unavailability, just rootedness. So here's the bigger picture. The man who never begs for love isn't cold. He isn't playing games. He isn't emotionally unavailable. He's simply someone who stopped outsourcing his worth to someone else's response time. He learned, somewhere along the way, that love should feel chosen, not extracted through anxiety, not won through performance, not secured through desperation. Remember that moment at the beginning? The version of him who just continued living, fully present but never anxious? That wasn't a strategy. That was identity. And it turns out, that's the most attractive thing a person can offer. Not the chase, the stillness. If this helped you understand relationships a little better, subscribe and join us. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and until next time, keep learning what really drives human connection.